For this part, we'll be focusing on individual behaviors. We are still on our leadership through organizational sciences 3-part series, so we are at the final run here. Quick intros again. Once again, I'm Ashley Grant, the Director of Experiences on awesome events. Used to be in person, but as we know, everything's turned virtual now, and we're still really excited to see your faces on screen. Our workshop host is Pravir Malik. He is the head of organizational sciences at the Zappos Family of Companies, and he's really excited to continue providing his knowledge with you all. We'll discuss the concept of light dynamics, a set of light-based processes based on perceiving light in its wholeness. These processes allow individuals to positively influence personal, team, and organizational issues through particular kind of light-based visualizations.
And essentially in workshop 1, we went through the market level and organizational level. In workshop 2, team level, and now we're going to go through individual level. But before we jump in, I just want to, again, remind us of the context. So the context is that we exist in a complex adaptive system. And if you recall, there's some characteristics of that system that are non-intuitive. You know, for example, there's distributed control, there's likelihood of paradox happening, there's small things that can result in big things. There's a phenomena we went over in the first workshop called far from equilibrium, where, for instance, when a lot of change happens, usually it's difficult, it's very easy to get overwhelmed by that change. But when we know we're operating in a complex adaptive system, then any kind of change, no matter how large, can be viewed as a positive thing, so long as we are able to react to it, keeping in mind that we're operating in a complex adaptive system. So that's the context, but obviously there's a different sets of tools that are required to operate successfully in a complex adaptive system. So when in the first workshop, we went through, for example, the whole notion of experimentation and simulations rather than investing a lot of money upfront in various market plays. We also went through that notion of the fourfold analytics, or the idea that there's a repeatable pattern of success that we see no matter how complex an organization might be. So for example, in the operation of a team, or more at the individual level through the last few decades. We had the introduction of emotional intelligence a couple of 2-3 decades ago. And as we discussed the last time, the power of emotional intelligence is really because we're all endowed with a very sophisticated radar system. And by paying attention to the different signals that arise in us, it connects us seamlessly with the environment around us. So emotional intelligence has a lot of power. But then the question is, what's the extent of emotions? Emotions have a certain kind of reality in a smaller space. So for example, when we're in a room with a meeting with different people, we might feel different emotions, but it's more difficult to feel emotion the more separated you are from a person. So that leads us to the next step in this progression, which is mindfulness. And this is something that's entered the corporate sector, I would say, in the last 15 years. It's become much more pervasive in the last 5 to 10 years. And this is the idea of really becoming attentive to what's happening in small things, of separating out ego dynamics, but paying attention to what a situation might be, how it might be changing, why it might be changing a certain way. So becoming mindful about what's happening. And the power of this is that it extends beyond the range of emotion, because if we can objectively become aware of things, then we can understand dynamics that are even more far removed from us. And so it gives us more power in connecting with the larger system we operate in. And when we come to light, I want to make the case, which we'll be going through in the next 20 minutes or so, that light by its very nature exists in everything, and everything can be thought of as emerging from light. So it has a much vaster connective power. And because of that, and because it exists deeply inside us, it allows us to make change or facilitate or influence change in a different kind of way that's very, very democratic, in the sense that we all have equal access to it. Try to capture the power in light, and I ended up writing a series of 10 books on what I call cosmology of light, but it just essentially it's a mathematical articulation of why light has its power. And I'll give you a very quick personal incident that led to my path down this inquiry. Anything that's truly sustainable has been kind of tested out for millions of years in the crucible of physical, chemical, biological systems. And the point here is that if you go deep enough into where it originates from, you can find that this pattern originates in light. So again, because we have access to light and we can apply light in concrete situations, in other words, we have access to this pattern that can create sustainability at the individual level. So, something, very concrete, like in the last, year and a half, have conducted about 50 workshops with many different, with people from many different backgrounds from all parts of the world. And there's been many people from the corporate sector as well. And we've done consulting engagements with tech companies, for example, in Silicon Valley, where we've used light. And the basis, the real basis here of using light comes down to a very simple thing. And that is that since light exists so deeply within us, so for example, like if we just focus on our hands and if we go deep enough, then we'll find that at the smallest levels, there's, the atoms and those atoms have a deep kind of signature of light. So there's nothing but light. But the point being is that here, something that I always introduce in the workshops or in the consulting engagements is this ability to play around with light. So, when we look at this with our physical eyes, there's some kinds of expectations we have. Like if we imagine this to be a ball and if we bounce it, it's going to abide by some physical laws. But then if we use our mind's eye and imagine a sphere of light, we can play with it very differently. And so, for example, suppose you have in a business situation, if there's a difficult relationship that you're experiencing, or if you yourself are feeling ungrounded, then I of who you are. So you're sitting inside this ball of light, and just kind of like experience that for half a minute, 1 minute. That's a very simple exercise. It builds the muscle of being able to re-see things in light, being able to exercise what I call dual vision, because we always see with our physical eyes and we attribute laws to things physically. But my point is that when you do this imagination like that, you're actually subscribing to a different kind of vision that can influence things even physically. And so simply by re-seeing things in light, by experiencing that light in yourself, is how you build the muscle. There's a vast amount of information and potential that lives inside light. And so we're allowing that information to unveil itself when we begin to practice these exercises in a certain way. So.